Welcome to the number one podcast covering Michigan State basketball. The Final Four is not on the schedule. Join Rod and me, Eric, as we dive deep into the Spartans to get you prepared for every game. Subscribe today for in-depth recruiting updates and fantastic interviews with today's important college basketball personalities like Robbie Hummel.
Thanks for having me. I have listened to your guys' podcast numerous times on drives throughout any Midwestern Big Ten city. So I am big fans of your guys' work.
Jay Billis.
And next time, hey, if anybody in Michigan wants a December tea time, call me. You wimps won't show up, but I'll be there. I'll be there and play in the cold. And Izzo will be in front of the fire with hot chocolate.
Coaches Thomas Kelly.
No problem. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Mike Garland.
Just can't sit there and trade twos for threes. You can't do it. You're gonna lose. Coming down the stretch, you're gonna lose.
And more. You won't find better coverage of Spartan hoops than you will get here. For both the casual and hardcore fan, come along as we take you for a green and white ride. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod here to talk about MSU's loss to the Minnesota Golden Gophers, 59-56 in Minneapolis. It was a game where the Spartans led by 9 midway through the second half, but then Tyson Walker got injured. It looked to be a re-aggravation of a groin injury he's been sort of dealing with. Minnesota stormed back to take the lead, and then it was sort of a dogfight all the way to the end. Cam Christie was fantastic from behind the arc, propelling the Gophers to the win. It was a game where Michigan State basically just shot itself in the foot, shooting miserably from the free throw line at 41%, missed 10 free throws. Gritty performance from Walker. Akins also played well offensively, but it was all for naught. It was somewhat fitting that Michigan State was down 3. Hogarth got fouled on a three-point attempt and only was able to convert 2 of the 3 free throws, and then that led to the eventual loss. So disappointing loss for Michigan State. They now have to return back to a game against Illinois on Saturday before they hit the road for 2 more games, and just a team that just is having a lot of trouble on the road, albeit lots of Big Ten teams are having trouble on the road. Although it was interesting tonight, too, the other 2 Big Ten games were both road wins by the opponents.
Yeah, very, very disappointing loss. And, you know, they've struggled from the free throw line all year, certainly by Michigan State standards. But, I could be forgetting a game. I don't think I am. I can't think of a game where you looked at it and said, well, that was the number one area that you lost it in. That was the case tonight. 7 for 17. It's unbelievable that a team that shot 63% from the line themselves won the game because of that 63% performance. But that's what happened. Minnesota had 2 more free throw attempts than Michigan State, but they had 5 more makes. 3-point game.
Yep.
That's it,
ball game.
Man. That's a ball game. And, you know, it's guys that, Carson Cooper, whatever, I'm not going to, that's going to happen with a center. Mm-hmm. But Malik Hall, terrible performance from the line. And that really he single-handedly really put them behind the 8 ball with his inability to convert from the line. You know, AJ, obviously, you'd like to think he could hit all 3. Last one just didn't go. But by the rest of the team standards, 2 for 3 was brilliant. It was Rick Barry. So, yeah, very, very disappointing loss. There's no 2 ways about it. They did a lot of things. Well, I do think, and you pointed out pretty clearly, the turning point in this game was Tyson Walker getting hurt. Now, I'm grateful that it looks like he's okay, because that looked bad, and we know he's been nursing one. And we know he's been nursing a groin injury. When he hobbled off, went to the locker room, boy, I was – and if
I didn't think we'd see him again.
If there's any silver lining, I was just praying, find a way to close this one out, and let's hope to God he's not out for long and maybe doesn't miss any games. I didn't think he'd come back. The fact that he came back and actually gave them what little semblance of an offense they had from that point is remarkable. But that was the turning point of the game in a momentum sense. Michigan State had pushed it out to 9, really seemed to be in a rhythm, and Minnesota was just lost. And the thing was, it's not like Minnesota came roaring back.
No, it was slow.
You could see Michigan State really struggled without Tyson on the floor to find any semblance of offense. And It's something. Michigan State had 16 assists on 21 made field goals. So that looks like a typical Michigan State performance, right? But I thought the ball movement was terrible in the second half. And we're recording this right after the game. So we haven't heard what Tom Izzo has to say, but I'm going to be shocked if he doesn't talk about selfish play. And I don't even know if that's the right word for it. He tends to use that word, but look, they were just trying to square guys up and go one-on-one. Even a lot of the buckets they had, I didn't think the ball movement was great tonight. There were a handful of possessions where it looked like Michigan State offense. And give Minnesota a little bit of credit for doing that to them, but not enough. That was Michigan State just not moving with a purpose in the half court. That's my 2 cents worth. And it cost them, But obviously, as we say, that Tyson injury was just enough to derail their momentum, because it really felt to me like they were going to put them away. They were going to stretch that thing out to double digits, and that was going to be good night. And instead, the offense was just bogged down. I don't remember what the score was at that point. Was it 40?
It was 45-36.
45.
Yeah.
And that was with what, like maybe 12 minutes left, something like that.
Probably. Yeah, that seems about right.
So they scored 11 points the rest of the way. That's also a pretty significant indictment of the way that they played offensively. Defensively, they weren't great. They weren't awful. I think that there were some possessions. There was a big one where Minnesota took the lead in that flurry when they scored whatever it was, 10 in a row, I think, something like that, 11 in a row, where somebody missed a free throw, probably Malik, one of the countless misses, and Minnesota gets the ball right down in transition of all things off a missed free throw to Cam Christie.
Yeah.
And he just steps into just no excuse at all for that kind of defense. And I felt that was, Cam Christie shot the hell out of the ball, and he shot well all season. So give him credit for hitting those shots. But Michigan State didn't defend him well.
Yeah.
They were late on. I mean, he did not hit shots where you're like, wow, that's just a tough make. They were all easy. They were all easy looks, and you just can't do that. They got Parker Fox in the first half. There's no that should never, ever happen. Malik gets blown by Parker Fox, who's missed 2 straight years with leg injuries. Are you kidding me? I understand it probably wasn't in the scouting report that he was going to try and go off the dribble, but even if it's not, come on. That's just poor. But again, I'm harping on that. For the most part, this is a game that I put on offensive execution or lack thereof as the main issue. And clearly the lead in that story was the free throw line.
Yeah, that was sort of just a reflection of sort of the other problems, right? And sometimes I feel like you see that with the free throws, like when you're, it's almost like they're getting your ineptitude moving stuff around. You just kind of get the free throw line and you have the same sort of energy getting to the line. I don't know. Malik certainly just looked very, he really lacked confidence going to the line, much like that last 3 that he took where he just barely got the rim,
miss. That was a bad miss.
He was very passive in the second half.
A great start. Yeah.
I know he was great the first 10 minutes.
He had a really good first half. And then he just never, that first possession, he actually made, Stephen Bardo commented on it, and I think he's right. It was an audacious attempt to go with a left-handed scoop, and he almost hit it. It was a good move. It shouldn't have been the kind of thing to jar his confidence, but he never found it. Now, give Minnesota credit for the adjustment they made. Minnesota in the second half, consistently brought doubles. So where's the problem there for Michigan State? The problem is they were never able to punish it. Never. Not once. And that's a problem. We used to talk about this all the time in, Nick Ward's sophomore and junior seasons, where he would get doubled, and because he was even worse, at least Malik wasn't turning the ball over. but he never made people pay for it. You have to be able to make people pay for bringing doubles. And to Minnesota's credit, they went at it in a very intelligent way. Most of the time, the guy that was open was cross court from Malik, which is not that unusual. And it was A.J. Hoggard. Michigan State doesn't necessarily want to take a bunch of A.J. Hoggard threes,
Right.
So they did it intelligently, but still, man, you got to beat that stuff. And they just didn't do it. That had a lot to do with taking Malik out of the game, So
Yeah,
some of
I
it
agree.
was Minnesota, but he still had free throw attempts that he didn't convert. And look, I'm a Malik Hall fan. This is a bad night. I don't think it's any more important or significant than that, but it was a bad night for him.
Yeah, and sometimes those doubles, and I don't know, I'm not watching film breaking down or something. I feel like some of it is the fact that people don't make themselves available, to
for sure.
get a quick pass and pass
For
around
sure.
the perimeter, right? It's just he dribbles into a double team, and people just kind of like, we're just going to watch him, as opposed to continue to move.
It was coming. When I say AJ was the guy who was open, that's basically the way the rotations would work. But when the double first came, it was generally, if I remember correctly, it was generally coming from the big. So it was a guy guarding Cooper or Sissoko primarily. Those guys absolutely, they have to do a better job making themselves available. I just think, not that this is any kind of excuse, but how often has Michigan State seen doubling this year? Not a lot, because they haven't had a post presence that other teams respect enough to do that with. So those guys, it's certainly not instinctive. That's not an excuse. You got to be better. But, that's really, I think that's the story.
All right, well, let's move along here, and we'll start with our brothers who just gutters player that Michigan State needed to keep in the gutter, which was Dawson Garcia. The brothers who just gutters are the go-to stop for gutter work on your house, downspouts, whatever you need done. They can put in heated gutters, which, it's only February. There's plenty of time for ice and snow to build up there. But you need to make sure when you have that snow melt that the water stays away from where it's supposed to stay away from. So the brothers who just gutters are the ones that can do that for you. They're professional, come quickly, very good pricing, efficient, and they're even out right now in February. They'll come out to your house or even your business and take care of things. If it's a small job, a big job, they can do whatever. Again, repairing, replacing, or cleaning out your gutters, whatever you need done. You can find them at the contact page, which is on www.tffinots.com/support. You can find an estimate if you're on the west or east side of the state, and they can hook you up. So a player with keep in the gutter was Dawson Garcia, who, for the first half certainly was kept down by Michigan State. And even in the second half, he didn't really end up doing too much. He ended up with 10 points, 4 of 10 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3, that huge 3 late. I mean, both the threes he made were grenades. Just 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, a block, a steal. I mean, in 33 minutes, he was pretty much kind of, I would say, pretty invisible most of the game. He was not nearly as effective as he was the first matchup.
They did. I mean, look, that guy scoring 10 points, you say that's a victory, right? And he didn't. Yeah. He also didn't do much on the boards. He only had 2 rebounds.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. Ben Johnson did a decent job of stopping Dawson Garcia because he played Parker Fox. Now, it worked. It was that stretch in the second half where Minnesota got back into the game, but he didn't go away from that lineup for much longer than I would have thought was the case. So some of that was on Minnesota's personnel decisions, but that last 3, again, I understand he's had a very rough year shooting the 3. That said, over the last 4 or 5 games, basically since the Michigan State game at Breslin, he has shot it much, much better. He has been much more like the guy he was last year and the guy he's been over his career. Those of you who listened to the episode we had Mike Garland on, you may remember that Mike Garland talked about Michigan State recruiting Dawson Garcia, and that the main reason that Dawson Garcia was regarded as highly as he was a McDonald's All-American, was that he was a 6'9", 6'10" guy who could actually legitimately stretch the floor. And so you can say, well, he came into the game shooting 26% and he goes 2 for 4. That's a lucky break, right? Okay, and I would agree with that, but to an extent. But Dawson Garcia is a better shooter than that. And I thought on that last one, honestly, and again, I hate to be beaten up on Malik, but I thought Malik's recognition and closeout was late. And I understand you don't want to come out too aggressively because Garcia had enough time. It wasn't a total grenade.
It was like 4 seconds, yeah.
There was more than that because I want to say, I think so. I mean, I could be wrong. You may have me. But my thought was you can't close out too aggressively because he can go by you.
Right.
And he looks to do that. But it's got to be, in that situation, it's got to be a better closeout than that. It has to be. And Malik was late. If you looked at the replay, you could see it clearly that Malik was he got there, but he got there when Garcia was already in the air. And he really didn't do anything to disrupt his rhythm as a shooter.
Yeah.
And so, when that happens, you're then just praying that he misses. You're relying on luck. And that's not a good spot to be in.
Yeah, they I think Minnesota finished the game almost 40% from three.
39.1.
Yeah, largely because of Cam Christie. And Garcia, he was 2 for 4.
Yeah,
then
they got a make in the first half from Carrington, who's a 17% shooter. He did the same thing to him at Breslin. But whatever, those things are going to happen. On the flip side of it, Hawkins was 0 for 5. He's a high 30s guy. Mitchell was only 1 for 3. He didn't even get up that many attempts. So they can't cry about it too much. Yeah.
No, I think generally like you said before, the defense was not as much the problem as it was probably more the offense who just got stuck in the mud too often in the second half.
I think the defense against the twos was perfectly fine. Minnesota shoots well inside the arc. Michigan State was pretty good there. They didn't. My problem was the way they defended threes. When you look at Christie and Garcia, especially Christie, they didn't make it tough on him. They just didn't. Kid's a good shooter. You give him credit for that. They did not make it tough on him. And so that was the defensive element that I didn't like. But overall, they were all right.
All right, so then the Michigan State player that cleaned the glass the best, brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. You had a 4 to 3.5 lead on me so far this season. You got Madi. Madi wins. He had 6.
Yeah.
And overall, pretty good rebounding performance by Michigan State, really. Madi had 6, and Cooper, who I had, and Hall both had 4. And Hogard, Akins, and Tyson all had 3. So good rebounding from the guard position, which is what we've been looking more for from Michigan State. So pretty good job cleaning the glass for Michigan State overall, I think, in the game.
It was.
It wasn't really a problem that we had thought it was going to be.
Wasn't a factor.
Madi was very good, and there's still the occasional ones where you're like, he just can't quite corral it, and he's just like a beat slow. But overall, he did okay. And just as a reminder too, if you want to get your windows cleaned, or maybe your screens, maybe you just need your house or your business power washed, maybe it's a high rise. You can call the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They've got a pretty big region. You can check them out at our support page. Again, that's at finalforce.notontheschedule.com/support. You can get a free estimate, 15% off if you mention rebound when you get your estimate. They've done my house. They're super nice, professional crew. They do very, very, very detailed work, and so you won't be disappointed with their work. They're so good. They even did the state capitol. So I don't know what more to say about Madi, except I thought he did his job today,
As a rebounder, he was okay. I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I thought Carson played a lot.
Yeah, I think they both played 19.
Okay. It felt even more than that. Frankly, I was a little surprised because I thought, I'm sure there's a reason, but I thought Madi was the better performer today. I mean, there's not a huge difference in their stats, but I just felt like he was playing a little better, and whatever. Wasn't a game breaker either way, but
Madi just had those 2 travels, the identical travel for this same feed, post feed, and then he shuffles his feet and then he dribbles, and what are you gonna do? So then we'll talk about the keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. Those of you who made your orders, we had quite a few orders for T-shirts and hoodies and stuff from for our logo store. So that is closed. We'll open up again sometime later this year, maybe. But if you're still looking for Spartan apparel or maybe some other apparel, you can head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. 20% off if you type in Final Four for the coupon code on checkout. They have super comfortable. In fact, today I'm wearing a vintage Michigan State basketball sweatshirt. Super comfortable, very wearable. They wash great. They really hold up, and so they're a favorite from our family. I got some more stuff just the other day. You won't regret it. So again, check out Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. The 5 keys to the game will start with number 1, which is the interior defense, which you just mentioned. Thought Michigan State did a pretty good job. I think, earlier whenever Garcia got inside, they were doing a quick double off of usually Farrell. But then, I don't know, Minnesota didn't get a whole lot going inside really at all.
Yeah, look, there were segments and Payne. It's rare you say, wow, the guy went 4 for 8 from the line, and that's a huge performance, but it was.
Yeah.
It was, this is a guy who came in shooting in the high 30s, so they'll take 50% any day.
Better than our guys.
Yeah, exactly. And, well, as I said, it's rare that 63% gets you beat, but it did today because Michigan State was just that bad. No, I didn't think Minnesota, they were far less productive than they were in the first game. And that includes rebounding. Combined 18 points, 9 rebounds between those two guys. You would take that. You would absolutely take that.
And then the second key to the game is pace. So this is, I thought, Michigan State started out pretty good. They've had occasional times in the first half, especially when they were getting some fast breaks and getting stuff going. But for the most part, especially the second half, even when they were extending their lead, really not much as far as pace, either at fast break or even getting into their sets quickly. There are a lot of almost 30-second violation of shot clock violations.
Yep, absolutely. No, it was not good. It was not good there. They did win the fast break points battle 10-3, but I'm not positive, but I think half of those might have come in the first 2 possessions. I know 2 of them did. I know the basket by Mahdi was a fast break bucket, and if the Tyson Walker 3 didn't count, it should.
Well, the one he had with the steal, and then that had to have been, right? So
well, I'm talking.
They had 8 at halftime.
No, I'm talking right at the beginning of the game, the very first possession Michigan State had. Minnesota won the tip. They came down, missed a shot. Michigan State got the rebound, got it up court very quickly to Tyson, measured a 3, and hit it. So
I bet you're right. I bet those. I bet the Tyson's 2 threes and the Mahdi 2. That was pretty much it for the first half.
That start had me thinking, all right, we're going to get this thing turned up the way we did in East Lansing. And it didn't. The biggest sin is the half court stuff, though. And again, we're working without the benefit of hearing Tom Izzo's post game, but I'm going to be surprised if he's not talking about that, because I just thought offensively they were very passive and very slow in getting into their stuff. And that just, they can't play that way. We talk about this all the time. They cannot play that way.
So the fourth key of the game is the boards. I think, I mentioned Michigan State did a good job here. I think both teams tied as far as overall rebounds. Michigan State had a 19% offensive rebounding rate, not very good. Minnesota, a 20% offensive rebounding rate, not very good. So both teams defensively rebounded well, and so that was just like a push.
But at least if the stats that I was looking at halftime were correct, I think it was, I don't think either team had a single offensive rebound in the first half. I believe it was 0-0. If that's even if that wasn't accurate, it couldn't have been more than like 1.
They each had 2.
They each had 2.
Okay,
all right.
Yeah.
The stats Whatever. I was looking. Well, that's what I get for looking at ESPN stats and believing it. But they said 0 both ways. But even so that's 2 in the first half each way, 3 in the second half each way. That's the frustrating thing about this game is some of the things that we talked about as being very important, limiting the interior guys, pretty much did that. Now, if you lump Parker Fox's 8 points in there, the picture looks a little better for Minnesota, but we're primarily talking about those 2 starters. They did a pretty good job containing those guys. This area didn't let Minnesota get much done at all on the offensive glass. A lot of the things that you would have thought were important coming into the game, they actually executed. It's just the things that we've talked about, the lack of pace and rhythm on offense in general, and then the horrible free throw shooting. Those are the things that killed him in the end.
Yeah.
And you just didn't see those things coming.
I actually skipped one of the keys of the game. It was the third one was actually energy and toughness. I don't know what you think about this. I don't feel like they lack that. It's just maybe lacking energy. I don't know. I don't feel like they got punched in the face and did, respond. Like, I don't know.
No, I think that if I had to, again, I'll be interested to hear what Izzo has to say, but from my vantage point, I thought their issues were execution related.
Yeah.
So for example, not closing on shooters the way you need to. Play it. It wasn't a chronic problem, but they had some issues in the first half with pick and roll coverage. The things like that I thought were execution related rather than, they're just not playing hard enough or they're not showing enough toughness. I think they were okay in those areas. Maybe the energy, as you alluded to, maybe that shows up in the fact that they didn't run their offense the way they need to.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, seemed very passive on offense, and they didn't really seem to get into going back to the pacing issue until there were 15, maybe 12 seconds left in the shot clock before they really started doing anything. And
exactly.
then it's sort of, it's like, now you don't have much going. Yeah.
That's what I mean. And look, if you allow a team to shorten the shot clock on you, you're playing right into their hands, because if they only have to play 15 seconds of real defense, well, that's a much easier task than if you're forcing them right out of the chute. You're getting the ball up court into the forecourt in a hurry, and you're getting into your sets. Well, that's going to test them in a different way. Michigan State, you're absolutely right. I mean, so many times it was 10, 12, 15 seconds just to get into the set. Minnesota's not that good defensively that they should do that to you. It wasn't like Michigan State was starting and stopping and Minnesota blew up a set, and they had to reset. They didn't even get into it.
Yeah, they were kind of, with the screens, they were hedging way out and forcing the guards way out to almost back out to half court. And then the guards weren't getting around it and making it difficult for them to try and get back and scramble.
Now, this is an area where, there's been this criticism in certain quarters of Michigan State's team this year that they don't have a viable, consistent shooting threat from the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which I agree with. I think anyone with eyes would say they don't have that. I mean, Malik Hall has been far better in Big Ten play, but as we've talked about, he's not been the kind of volume guy that really, and Michigan State over the years, it's also true that Tom Izzo teams are generally better offensively when they have that kind of player. I think in a game like this one, that's where it shows up, because if they're going to defend pick and roll that heavily, well, the easiest pass for a guard to make is to the four-man, to the guy setting the screen, if that's the guy you're using to set the pick,
Right.
And Michigan State doesn't really have that counter available to them, So the fact that Minnesota was able to play that way, and they did a good job, and Michigan State really didn't make them pay for doing that. But that's one of the ways you can make a defense pay for playing that aggressively is, okay, you just have, instead of having the screen setter rolling hard, you have him flare out as a shooter, as we saw Joey Hauser do a ton of times, and Jaren Jackson and Kenny Goins. I mean, you can go on and on and on through the list of guys that Tom Izzo's had who have been able to punish defenses that way. They don't really have that option at this point, And so I think, to my own 2 cents, is that to some extent, I think that criticism is a little overdone, because I think that this team, what gets forgotten is this team has other elements offensively that a lot of previous Michigan State teams have not had available to them, namely the fact that they have guards who can play downhill very effectively. And that gives them a chance, an opportunity to do some things differently that other Michigan State teams have been able to do. Tonight, Michigan State's guards did not do very much that way at all. And they weren't able to make Minnesota pay for playing that aggressively, you know? So, yeah. I mean, the points in the paint in this game were 20.
Yeah.
And that's just not what you want to see if you're Michigan State.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance we're going to see a lot more of that defensive approach from other teams this season until Michigan State figures it out.
You would say that, and I understand why, but you also have to remember not everybody can play that way. Sure. Because you need a big that you feel confident in terms of his ability to actually contain the guard and then recover as he needs to. Not everybody has that. It's kind of akin to, I was reading a Michigan basketball blog after the MSU went over Michigan, whenever it was, a week ago, 10 days ago. And that person was talking about how they were surprised that Michigan State did not apply much more ball pressure defensively on Michigan's guards, particularly because they didn't have Doug McDaniel available, right? And that person surmised that it was a function of disrespect, that they didn't think Michigan could beat them anyway, and stubbornness. Well, stubbornness is the wrong word. It's a word I particularly in the context of Michigan State basketball have a big problem with, because it gets used completely inappropriately and stupidly, frankly. But there is a way that Michigan State plays under Tom Izzo defensively, and it does not include massive ball pressure. Now, in the abstract, in a vacuum, it's absolutely correct that a team without a real point guard, you should pressure them, right? You should get up into them.
Right.
And I might even personally say, boy, I wish they'd done a little bit more of that against Michigan, you know, but they don't do that. And so that also holds true in what we're talking about right now. There are a lot of teams, no matter what happens, Purdue is not going to have Zach Edey playing ball screen defense the way we saw tonight. They're just not. Yeah. And there are other teams that fit that mold too. So yeah, they'll see some, but they've seen that at different points all year anyway. It just happened to be effective tonight, but I put some of that on Michigan State too. It's not just the defense. It's the way Michigan State's guards handled it or didn't handle it. I was just mentioning that is a scenario where a shooting threat at the 4 can come in really handy to punish a team for that. And Michigan State does not really have that guy.
So the fifth key to the game is the road. Michigan State falls to 1-5 on the road in the Big Ten. And, I don't feel like the Williams crowd was like spectacular or anything. It seemed like it was fairly empty. The shots showing the upper deck, there weren't a whole lot of people. But they lose again on the road, and I don't know what it says, except that they just haven't won on the road.
Until they start reeling off some road victories, what it says is they're not a very good team away from home.
Yeah,
I mean, whatever the reasons are, you can't argue with the numbers. They've won one time. So you look at the remaining games on the road. What do they got? They go to Purdue. Well, they're not winning that one. They go to Penn State,
Michigan,
Indiana. And Indiana. I got to tell you, those are 3 games that a good team, which I still believe this team has in them, ought to win. But they got to do it. I mean, we're going to be talking about this before every one of these games, Yeah. Because it's a fact. They have not performed on the road. And this is another one that you're going to look back at, just as I think they do with the Nebraska game and maybe even the Illinois game, and say, it was right there.
Mm-hmm.
All we had to do in this case, was shoot free throws decently. Not even great. They just were 7 for 17.
Yeah.
11 for 17 wins you this game.
Mm-hmm.
Not great, like mid-60s, wins you this game. And they couldn't do that much. So
Yeah.
until they prove it, yeah.
Until you prove it, you haven't proven it. Anything else, individual performances you want to talk about before we head out of here?
I mean, the Tyson obviously kind of carried the load, and then there was a stretch where Jaden Akins really did some nice things offensively. Outside of those two guys, they didn't get a lot of production. It was not a good night for A.J. Hogard. I mean, he was 1 for 6 from the floor. He, even apart from missing that last free throw, which again, on a night where the team was so horrible, his 2 for 3 actually looked pretty good. But
Yeah.
they had that possession where they were still down 3 with whatever it was, 18 seconds left. And strategically, it was a smart play. Like
Yeah.
if you can get it, get a quick
Mhm.
2, but you got to convert the 2.
Yeah.
And he allowed Payne to alter his shot. And, that was kind of the ball game. He just did not never looked like he was really on it. He had 5 assists. They all came in the first half. Second half, it was nothing. So I was disappointed in him. We talked about Malik, really good first half, not much positive in the second. Nobody else really worth talking about, I don't think, either way.
No,
It just
I don't
was
think so.
not. It was those two guys, Walker and Akins, that really carried them offensively. And that wasn't enough. They needed a third guy, and you're hoping and you're expecting that AJ and/or Hall would be that guy, and just neither one of them was really up to that in the end, and it cost them. So it means that this game on Saturday. I'm not talking about make or break in terms of an NCAA tournament bid. There, despite the moaning and gnashing of teeth you're going to hear after this one on the internet, understand that Michigan State is not on the bubble for this loss. I mean, I was seeing them basically in about the 9 range before this game, so you'll probably see them at 10, might even be an 11 in some people's minds, although I think a road loss to a team that's actually playing pretty well is not likely. But more from the perspective of where are you headed as a team? Are you finding that late season momentum that you want to see to make sure you're going into March playing your best basketball, right?
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, you've got an Illinois team that has played very well, far better than I expected, because they're still a team without a point guard. It's remarkable to me that they've managed to do this, and also to go through a stretch without Terrence Shannon, who's now back. In fact, I don't know if that's actually made them better. To me, since he's been back, they don't look quite as cohesive as they were looking either when he was playing originally or after he went out. We'll see how that all ends up, but it's an important game from that perspective for sure. You need to, if you go out and you take care of business and you beat Illinois at home, people will still talk about this kind of loss, but it won't have the same impact. You'll be back on the beam, so to speak. I think from a momentum perspective, and then you can go into those 2 road games that you talked about that certainly look like winnable road games from the perspective of the teams you're playing, and feel confident again that you can go out and get the job done. So
Yep.
It's not to say that the Illinois game at home wouldn't have been just as important even if MSU had won this game. It would have been, because then you're talking about continuing momentum, and now, it's about making sure that you don't lose what you had.
Right. Yeah. You think about it. If you want to go 500 in the Big Ten, you've got to make up home away victories for every home win you don't pull off. And they already have 1 home loss this season, and they've sort of broken even. That's why they're 6-6.
Right.
And then with 2 road games coming up, you can't drop the Illinois game.
This team is not, 10-10 is not That's not.
Oh, I don't. I agree. That's not where you.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit of my 1980s thinking, like, oh, if
Right.
you just get 500
That's-
right,
That most
But,
years most years in the Big Ten, even now, that would be fine from a tournament perspective. You don't. I mean, for this team, so that would mean 4 more losses. Yeah, that's not ideal.
Yeah,
I mean, I
that'd be
still
trouble.
think they'd probably get in. Depends on who the wins and losses came against to some extent,
Yeah,
but
sure.
you don't want to test that. So
No,
yeah, it
for sure.
matters. But again, the bigger picture, I'm not worried about NCAA tournament stuff at this point. Maybe I will be later, but I'm not right now. What I'm worried about is how they're playing and what the mentality is.
Yeah. I'd like to get to a point where I trust this team a little bit more, and I just am not at that point.
Well, you can't. I mean, this is tonight.
For obvious
Tonight
reasons.
is proof positive of it. I felt like they had been finding a rhythm. They'd won 5 of 6. I think they have been playing generally reasonably good basketball, all things considered. And then, and again, it's not like this was just an absolute stink bomb of a performance. It wasn't. But in some key areas look, free throw shooting, when that's a big factor and you're losing a game, it's always a big deal. People always get infuriated by it.
Right, because no one's guarding you.
Yeah, and by the way, for Michigan State fans, this is not a normal thing. For the most part, if you look over Tom Izzo's career, Michigan State teams have generally been good to outstanding free throw shooting teams. So this team, and on the rare occasions where they haven't been, they've usually been better in enough areas for it not to matter as much. Whereas this team, the margins have been a lot finer. So when you throw out a really bad performance like they did today, it's going to have a disproportionate impact. As I said, they haven't been really very good all year. And yet this is the first time I felt like it was the number one bullet point on the things that cost them a win. So, and I guess the lesson in that is if you don't get your act together from the line, sooner or later, it is going to bite you. It is going to cost you a game. And that's what happened tonight for sure.
All right, well, let's get out of here. We'll be back with a preview for the Illinois game coming up. Just a reminder to check out our support page if you want to support the show financially. We appreciate that. You can do one-time gifts via PayPal or Venmo, or recurring basis on Substack or Patreon. You can find all those links at thefinalfoursnottheschedule.com/support. Also, you can find the links to get a hold of the Brothers Who Just Do Gutters, the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids, and Nudge Printing, as well as getting an opportunity to get Coach Garland's book, Agoji. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.